Patreon, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Welcome to another episode of the Pedestrian Podcast, what will be the final podcast of the 2020 Seattle Seahawks season after whatever happened, whatever the hell that was last night. Joining myself, as ever, Stuart Court, is Mr. Adam Nathan. How are we, sir?
I wasn't even sure if you were going to ask me how I was there because you know the answer. It's fucking shit.
Well, one thing, there is a certain beer label which I was drinking before you joined the stream, and
You
I
weren't.
opened another one before you jumped on.
Well, I mean, what chance have we got if you're going to be, messing with, the spirits like that, Stu? It's not going to work. You cannot drink Camden Hells. It's Arsenal beer. I've told you this before.
Yeah, to be fair, it was a Christmas present. It wasn't something I went out and purchased.
You'd rather get a lump of coal for Christmas than that.
Yeah, to be fair, there's a lot of explanation I could make, but maybe that'll be better than talking what we're going to have to talk about because the Seahawks lost last night, ended their 2020 season at home in the playoffs for the first time under Pete Carroll. They lost 30-20 to John Wolford and nine-fingered Jared Goff. Don't really want to spend much time talking about it because I think it's more the post-mortem that people will listen to, or more listen for. But yeah, it was everything of the last 7 weeks in the worst. The game was 3.5 hours long and it felt like 9.
That third quarter, I think, it lasted an hour for one, and I think it was the worst quarter of football I've ever watched. I think there were 6 punts, a turnover on downs, and a field goal.
Yeah,
and I don't think there was a play that would even resonate as vaguely memorable. That is true of the whole Seahawk game, to be honest, unfortunately. But that quarter was just the embodiment of a terrible couple of months of Seahawk football, unfortunately, wasn't it?
it was. Yeah, I can't believe the game was only 3.5 hours long, as I said. But it's just when the opposing quarterback comes into Seattle and completes, they both complete 12 for 25 and sub 50%. You're like, okay, cool. The Seahawks won that then, surely, all right? And then that happened. So, there's obviously a lot of blame flying around on Seahawks Twitter and Facebook group and everything else. Everyone's had their opinion. Slightly varied from wild to quite sensible to somewhere in between. So, what is your main takeaway from last night?
My main takeaway from last night is that was a bad coaching beatdown as I've ever seen this coaching staff take. If you think about the storylines in Seahawk world going into this game, I would say a lot of it focused on who's playing quarterback for the Rams. Mm-hmm. What are we going to do about Aaron Donald, and things like that. Well, their first choice quarterback was in an ambulance. Their second choice quarterback had 3 pins in his thumb. And the defensive player that we were all terrified about barely played in the second half. And Sean McVay and Brandon Staley just thought, well, we'll just coach around this. And because the scheme and the systems in place that they've got are so well entrenched in there that, it's almost like a great soccer football manager that when the system's right, you just plug people in and play. Leonard Floyd had a game that Aaron Donald would be proud of. They just coached around all the problems. And I think it says a lot about where the Seahawks are right now, that we focus so much on individual player and personnel because the scheme isn't there right now on either side of the ball. Defensively is better. It's much better than it was first half of the season. But I just don't think there's anything there that, for the roots of what we used to do, I feel have been pulled out and placed somewhere else. And I think we play on very flimsy foundations. And as a result, one of these bad losses was always going to come at some point. And it's happened when you least wanted it to happen.
Yeah, I think the opus on what happened last night has come from Jackson Bevins over on Field Goals, who's who's always brilliant with his cigar thoughts, but he just dissembled everything on the evening of the game time, and obviously over the next 6, 7, 8, 9 months, obviously the next 3, 4, 5 years as well. But it's just the fact that how unprepared they were. Like talking Aaron Donald missed 40 snaps, probably 30, 35, 40 snaps, and it was almost like they spent the entire week, right, just game planning for him, which one didn't work anyway, but two, when he went out, it's like we don't have to worry about blocking and pass pro, because I think they got more sacks when Donald was out of the game than when he was in, which is, I mean, Leonard Floyd is just had our number this year. For the Rams, but it was just so, there's like a weird like arrogance to it almost, isn't there?
Yeah, and I think Pete embodied that in his end of game press conference when he said that he had no place in his mind or something for that sort of outcome. It's almost like,
to be fair, it's the third or fourth. He said that before this season more than once.
But there is this view that the Seahawks obviously just think, and Pete especially, just think they're going to win every game. And in a way, I think that's indicative of how secure in his mind he is with his philosophy and the way in which he's got the team playing. And for me, that's the ultimate problem with the team right now. And so we're at this tipping point where the head coach, look, maybe it's all protect the team bollocks and not throwing her under the bus. I'll kind of make it seem like I'm an idiot, but deep down, I know there's further issues. I hope that is the case, because if the case is that he thinks this is the way to win and that we'll just win, we're just unlucky this week or whatever, then we're knackered going forward. So hopefully it is just him covering up issues that he knows about in order to protect the team, as the saying goes.
Yeah, I think that definitely is a massive part of it. I think that's one reason why Russell Wilson's press conferences are so dull, even when you wait 2.5 hours.
And Tyler Lockett.
Like the Tyler Lockett one was slightly dull, but it's just a whole outlook more of like the next few months was just I find it interesting. I don't know why, but it was 4 o'clock in the morning, I guess. Yeah, just like it's just like it's fun, but it's like the recency stuff of it. Like the defense is clearly turned around. The defense was not the reason this team lost last night. They give up a couple of. I think there was 2 44-yard pass completions by Goff, or no, one to Cobb, and then there's a long run for Akers as well in there. But apart from that, they could not really have done any more. Yes, against limited quarterbacks in different ways, but like. The offense is the issue, and I think everything was kind of embodied by Pete Carroll talking about the 4th and 1, which Damian Lewis was injured, so it was like a 2.5, 3 minute delay, commercial break, everything, and then they late get out of the huddle and they end up false starting, which didn't matter anyway because it was going to be delay a game. And he said that he got involved in that process, which like, why, like, why are you? Why really? Why has it took 3 minutes to even if it's just I think that embodied everything that went wrong on the offensive side last night, because Pete Carroll is micromanaging to the detriment at certain points, and possibly like the peak of all that was last night, Adam.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot to say here, and we don't write a show schedule, so a lot of this will probably be stream of consciousness bouncing around. But I think on that point, if there's one thing that has come from this, it's that the way in which Pete wants to play to go forward, if he's going to remain the head coach, which we'll discuss whether he should, we know he will because of the contract. Yeah. You've been reading about Nick Saban this week in his book. He has got to start delegating certain things to other people who are experts in his field. Sean McVay, for example, is an offensive mastermind and has always accepted that that's what he's good at, and has always therefore delegated his defense to the best man available. But right now, we've got a defensive coordinator who we all accept is just kind of playing the defense Pete Carroll wants to. And Schottenheimer, fair play to him, I don't think that much of this is on him, because we knew what he was coming into the job, and it's basically just Pete Carroll's man on offense, and that needs to change. And it's the same with the timing issue and the burning of timeouts and the challenges, which we've got another hormonal one this week. I mean, there's kids playing Madden that can manage the clock better than Pete Carroll does right now. And that's just not acceptable.
No, it's that. One thing on that McVay thing, he's hired 2 defensive coordinators for the Rams. One was his first gig as the man, the head coach. He's still only like 18 when he got the job, but he hired Wade Phillips, who's got 35 years experience. That's exactly what Bill O'Brien did in Houston when he come from Penn State. He hired Romeo Crennel, who's called defensive player, worked with defensive players all the time. His second one was someone he looked into, researched, and got. Staley was the Broncos linebacker coach last year. Name a Broncos linebacker. Like I know Chubb and Miller are, but name an actual proper 3-down middle linebacker for the Broncos have had in the last 10 years. But like he's so far, he just sort of like, look, I trust you to do this. Yes, they've probably got this two of the top 5 defensive players in the league on that, but like the Seahawks did, and it worked, and the Rams have, and it's working. But it's the fact that when Pete Carroll's hired 3 different OCs, obviously come with Jeremy Bates, who's only here a year. He just insisted on paying and getting Charlie Whitehurst. He had Darrell Bevell, who was jettisoned out despite having, yes, he had Marshall Lynch, but like apart from Doug Baldwin, there wasn't much else on that offense, really, was there? I mean, Jermaine Kearse is really just like, he was successful. He caught passes in big moments, but like DK Metcalf has passed Jermaine Kearse in 2 years. Do you know what I mean? So, and then after that, Darrell Bevell gets run out of town. He hires, like when Darrell Bevell was fired 3 years ago, the whole world was right. This is it. Russell Wilson is in year 6, 7. We're gonna get a guy who can put Russell Wilson in the right position to take that next step, which wasn't that much of a step for Wilson to take anyway. And he hires a guy which is, if anything, then was 2 steps back from Bevell. I mean, Bevell had his faults, but like, he just. When was the last time we saw like anything that Bevell called? You watch all like the fun trick plays that see what's called. They're pretty much all with Darrell Bevell calling the plays. Brian Shotton came from Georgia, where he had Sony Michel and Nick Chubb, and they didn't do anything. Like, he was there for 1 year.
A fake toss rollout is about as exciting as it's got under Schottenheimer. And actually, it's not even the plays that I have the biggest issue with, which is an issue. It's, if you've watched any of the other playoff games this weekend, which I'm sure everyone has, it's the pacing and the rhythm at which other teams play. And every play that we have seems to be like a drama in its own right. Whereas, I'm watching the Saints now, and they just put together 5 or 6 plays in rhythm with a pace and a structure. Whereas for us, everything seems like it's start the play, run the play, stop the play, start again. There doesn't seem to be any kind of 3 or 4 play in advance thinking. And look, it's everyone in the national media talks about how the Seahawks offense isn't great and is ruining Russell Wilson or not maximizing his potential. Now, maybe they're wrong, which they could be. We watch the team probably as much as they do. Maybe they're wrong. But what I would say is when everyone in a group who's more objective than we are because they're not watching it with emotion is saying that sort of thing, maybe they've got a point.
Yeah. I'd agree. But I think, but also on that, Russell Wilson has never had, like, this is as good as this offense is going to get, like, for target wise. Because you've got Tyler Lockett, who's a 1,000-yard receiver. DK Metcalf is just ascending at a wild rate. Chris Carson is maybe at the peak of his powers. And then you've got people like David Moore, and the tight end room is not going to have the investment it had this year ever again for a multitude of reasons. And it's just been boring. And then whatever the fuck that was last night for the last 6-7 weeks. And it's so clear that Buffalo game, but it was the second half of the Arizona game. That first half of the Arizona game, if you sit in at halftime Arizona, oh, by the way, Russell Wilson will throw 7 more touchdowns in the next 2.5 months. You think, okay, cool, something's bad has happened there, and it turned out it did. On Russell Wilson, you've said it for a few weeks. I think I said it a couple of weeks ago, but you said it more consistently than me that jittery, broken look he has, like a broken toy. You said last week that he looks like he needs the off season. I mean, unfortunately, you were proven more accurate than you have through any other sport watching you've done over the last few years, I guess.
Well, whether I was right or wrong, unfortunately, he's got the off season now to work on it. I just thought that everything was so free in the first 5 or 6 games of the season. And in the last 7 or 8, it just looks like he's playing with the weight of the world on his shoulders. Like he's not running. He's not taking off in kind of run, pass, option plays. He's not taking the same deep shots he is. And, everyone knows that, this too high safety that teams are playing against us is in part neutering the offense, which it shouldn't do. But it seems to me, and, this is purely hypothetical, but it seems to me that after the Arizona second half in Glendale and after the Buffalo game, it's almost like Pete Carroll walked into his coaches meeting on a Monday morning and said, I told you, it doesn't work. You can't do it. And it feels like when a quarterback is playing with the knowledge, like he's almost playing like, or we're watching the Bears game now, he's almost playing like Nick Foles was playing or Trubisky's playing, knowing there's another guy backing you up. But it's not another guy that's your backup. It's like there's another whole system in place as a backup if you fail with this one. It strikes me as Carroll was saying, like, you can do all the nonsense you want to do on offense with your silly little throwing and your running around and your passing and these touchdown things that you insist on scoring. But there was always a thing in the back of his mind that whenever Pete felt like it wasn't working exactly how it should, he'd just pull it. And I think Jackson Bevins said that in his piece, that like, it's okay if Wilson throws 4 picks in a game, because the likelihood is he'll throw 4 touchdowns in 7 or 8 others. And I'm okay with that. But Pete's not. And so we're at this position where he's throwing like 1 pick and 2 touchdowns every game. And with the surrounding talent, that's not enough.
No, it's not. But also, like, you just see with Pete on that is that the things he brings up, like he brought up that Russell Wilson threw 40 touchdowns, which is, it's a milestone. But the record is like 13 more. Do you know what
15
I mean?
more.
15 more. Like Aaron Rodgers, 48 threw more than he's punted or whatever that weird stat was last week. But like it's the only time this season that the Seahawks have changed things up, and it was to a complete detriment, because that's the biggest gripe. And I think like the press conferences last night were weird, because like you said, they were protecting the team to a certain extent, but there was slight between the lines rib digs, weren't there, from Wilson and Lockett in Lockett's rambly way. But it's just they haven't changed things up. They clearly go into a game. But we talked when we played the Jets about they can do it, but they revert to type, and then I'm awful for the rest of the game. But I don't know. It's but yeah. I mean, Russell Wilson. There's a lot of people. There's way too many people calling that he should be traded, which is just. I mean, that's just not it, is it, Adam?
Well, I mean, you'd only even contemplate that, in my opinion, if it freed up $35 million of cap space a year, which I don't even think it does next year. I think there'd be an enormous dead cap hit that we'd take. So obviously you'd recoup a lot of picks, but let's park that firmly away, because that's not going to happen. My problem is that I can't see any way that they're not just going to bring back the same main guys. It's going to be Schneider, fine. It's going to be Wilson, fine. It's going to be Carroll. I'm not particularly fine with that, but he signed a new 5-year contract, so it's going to be that. And I'm struck by thinking how much is really going to change, and that's what leaves. Like I'm not. At the end of last year, all the players were like, "This feels like the 2012 Seahawks team, and next year's our real push." And I didn't believe that, because I didn't think there was enough talent. But at least you could see there was a full draft and like 60 million of cap money to play with. Mm-hmm. This team that we've just seen, what with that money and the Jamal Adams pick, like it's almost the resources of a team and a quarter. So it's going to be hard to have that again. And that's what leaves me most deflated today.
They won't. They won't have, like I said, on offense. They won't have that again. They're gonna have. Chris Carson won't play another down for the Seahawks. I think Mike Dugal made a point that the only way Chris Carson will is if it's like a clowny thing. And he comes back in like June, July, or whatever. Comes late in the process because they have to not pay someone. It's probably going to be Chris Carson, and then you're trusting on Bashard Penny, who has 15 yards in the last 15 months, and Carlos Hyde maybe could be another $3 million, but he can only play a game at a time. And you got DJ Dallas and Travis Homer. Like this team, offensively, this team is probably as good as it's going to get this year, and they scored 2 touchdowns against the Rams defense, which is good, but come on. Schottenheimer, Brian Schottenheimer is someone we started off. Like we said, we knew what we were getting. We didn't enjoy the start of it, and then we kind of, especially at the start of the season, look, this is cool. If this is going to carry on, this is like there was chat with him being involved with head coaching gigs and head coaching jobs and the rest of it, and then, I mean, he's on the hot seat in the lightest way someone could be. Like he's going to be back next year. I don't think he should be, but like you said, the likelihood of Pete Carroll went this way, took 2 steps back with Schottenheimer. The likelihood is, if he did it again, he'd go even further back into his shell with his next hire.
That's the thing. I mean, Schottenheimer's just done his job. And for me, the offensive problems are a pay grade above Schottenheimer. I don't think he's a particularly good offensive coordinator. I don't think that's a shot at the guy particularly. He hasn't been a good offensive coordinator anywhere he's been. So why would he be a great offensive coordinator now? He seems like a decent enough bloke. Tries hard, but we're a team that's trying to win Super Bowls. And I don't think there's many other teams in the NFL of our level that would be saying, God, I'd love to have Brian Schottenheimer as my offensive coordinator. But ultimately, I would say he's performed his job description pretty much to the way in which his boss wants it to be done. And everything in this conversation we're going to have today is going to come back to that as my main issue.
Yeah. Where should we go next, Adam?
Well, I mean, I want to address something on the Carroll thing that I've been going through the Facebook group quite a lot today. You can't miss some of the stuff that's been said, and there's been a lot of let's remember where we were in the 80s and the 90s, and let's not don't wish, be careful what you wish for and whatever. And people were saying that after the Dallas game 2 years ago. And at that stage, I would suggest it was premature because it was the first really awful loss in the playoffs now. This is the 3rd year in a row of that. Yeah. So, I've got full respect if that's the attitude you want to have. You like your 9-win floor. You like the consistency of getting to the playoffs. You saying, well, look, we're a 12-4 team. But Russell Wilson is going to be retired for a long time. And it took the franchise like 36 years to get a guy as good as Russell Wilson. And they lucked into that in a 3rd round. It might be another 36 years. And as I said in the last week's pod, if 5 or 6 years after Wilson retires, we're back to being a 6-10 team, you're going to look at these years and think, fuck, we really needed to get something more done then. And I don't want to waste the years anymore.
Yeah, we did that. We did that for the first 6 weeks of the season when we were watching Quinton Dunbar hop around the field and Shaquille Griffin forget that there's a game going on. We looked back and went, oh man, we used to have Richard Sherman and Cam Chancellor. It's the quarterback, like the 80s thing is fine, but the 80s Seahawks didn't have Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson, you ask anyone, Russell Wilson is near the top of the quarterback lists and tiers that people put together because, like you said, they haven't had a quarterback like him. Hasselbeck was unbelievable, took teams to Super Bowls with a running game and a decent defense. But this guy is legitimately the only, he's the, as you said last week, a few weeks ago, when we were talking about MVP, he's the most valuable part of this team, probably all the way through. If you take a run through the family tree of this team, it's just that the expectations have to change with the person running, throwing the ball around and handing the ball off, and it needs to change again because he's been to 2 Super Bowls in 10 years, and they were in his first 3 seasons.
And since then, we've had one more playoff win than the Jaguars have.
And they've picked in the top 3 4 times in that time.
This is an unfair question to ask you, but try and get yourself into Pete Carroll's head. Dangerous place to be.
It's easy.
But do you think Carroll values Russell Wilson, the player? As a man, I know they love each other and they've got great respect. But do you think Carroll, deep down, thinks that Wilson was a crucial component to 2013?
You kind of changed the question halfway through.
Yeah, 2013 and onwards. Like, because for me, there's a bit of Carroll that reckons Matt Flynn would have done the same job with that same team around.
Maybe, but I don't agree with that.
I don't agree.
Because the 2020 Russell Wilson would not have won with 2013 Russell Wilson was a completely different everything, really. Like his persona was different. His like he was running the ball like Lamar Jackson. Like he wasn't doing that, but he was getting 25, 30 yards. He was willingly running the ball. It was an option. I think it might have been Jackson again, pointing out this thing that like mesh point thing is just isn't respected anymore. I don't know. There's a weird nagging thing that I think we kind of saw it because 4 years ago, Pete was talking about teachings with Russ and Earl and maybe Sherm going up a level, like taking their knowledge up to a different level. That never really seemed to change anything on field. It's the college coach part of Pete Carroll really is lingering at the minute.
How so?
Because we don't have any plus 30-year-olds apart from Bobby Wagner in this team. So is whatever Pete Carroll does, what Pete Carroll wants to do works with a guy in his first 4 years in the league on, what was Russell on, 600 grand, 900 grand a year, maybe, for those first 3 years. It doesn't work when the guy's getting 35 million. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
It's a weird nagging thing. It's just like Russell Wilson's the other side of that 30 now. Like it just doesn't seem. I don't know. I think people point out before Russell Wilson is a John Schneider guy. He's the reason he's here. John Schneider is the reason Russell Wilson's here. It's not Pete Carroll. If Pete Carroll his way, we'd have had Andy Dalton.
Well, we have Jamal Adams because of Pete Carroll.
Schneider.
It was a Carroll thing, wasn't it? From all you read, it seems like Carroll was the driving force behind getting.
Yeah, but exactly, that's defensive. But offensively, like I'm pretty certain we have DK Metcalf because of John Schneider. Didn't we trade up for DK?
63rd pick, wasn't it?
63. Yeah, I'm pretty certain we traded with New England to get DK. But yeah, like the offensive guys, he just doesn't seem that. I think this kind of answers your question. Pete Carroll is more connected to Bobby Wagner than he is Russell Wilson.
The player, almost certainly. I think Carroll and Wilson love each other as human beings.
Yeah.
But yeah, as the player, for sure.
Yeah,
that's the thing. I still think that Carroll reckons he can win a Super Bowl with great defense and a good running game and a quarterback who just doesn't fuck up. But that's not the way the game is anymore. Which
half makes sense with how they've approached the backup position. Obviously, backup quarterback is not that important, but well, maybe is that a bit important because as we saw last night. But yeah, like we've got Geno Smith. We've had one draft pick at the quarterback position since they took Russell Wilson. You don't do it that way. No team does it that way. Obviously, you might end up with Taysom Hill, but it's there's a weird nagging. I don't think Russell Wilson's going anywhere. But I think if Schneider goes or Evan left for any reason, it would be interesting to see what happens with his team and that relationship as well.
Well, I think the question is, and I was talking to Rob Staten about this last night, is how happy is Russell Wilson? Russell Wilson wants to be the league MVP.
Yes.
That's absolutely obvious. He was loving.
Legacy.
Yeah. He's all about his legacy now. As a person, as a player, he is clearly looking to how am I going to be looked at when I'm retired. This is now 3 years in a row where I would say that he's not been put in a position where that's even remotely possible by the way in which the team's been structured and put together. How many more years is he going to allow that to happen for before he starts to get pissed off? Because he's not stupid.
No, but one thing, what did Russell Wilson do for 2.5 hours between game ending and press conference?
That's
He
weird, isn't
had
it?
not showered. What happened? And obviously, we're never going to know. But maybe that's the conversation was had. But I think they did address helping him out. I think in the off season, they're what, second pick, third pick was an offensive guard who was all about running the ball. Like, that's exactly what he did at LSU. But yeah, the structure of it is just not. It's not for us, which is. Just...
But I mean, do you think there's any chance that Wilson spent those 2.5 hours watching and shouting at a TV as Antonio Brown was tearing up for the football team? Now, we didn't want Antonio Brown. I wouldn't want the guy anywhere near the building. But Wilson went on record and said that he did want him. And I just wonder how, if that's the sort of thing that's going to start ticking him off as the years go on. He's 32 now. And as we say, his motive now for his career is legacy.
I mean, he was talking 6 years ago with Michael Evan about owning the team, doing this, doing that, and like he's obviously made ownership strides, but he's not winning any more Super Bowls. Winning Super Bowls and MVPs, and obviously games, because that's how you do both those things, is of paramount importance to Russell Wilson. And it's, I don't know. I don't know. Like, I think we've talked about before with Pete. I think we talked with Joe Fowler about Pete Carroll, the stuff he does that no one sees. That's a way bigger part of the conversation than the team going forward, if that makes sense. Because
I agree.
The culture is massive. It's a massive part of how this team. Like Carlos Dunlap was talking earlier today about like how it's different in Seattle. How it's like he's gone from Cincinnati, which is kind of like foggy, I guess, is a one way to put it, and he's come to Seattle, and it's just like a breath of fresh air. It's reinvigorated him, and he wants to stay around. And like I texted you earlier about the difference from him talking to people like Shaquille Griffin and Chris Carson who haven't been anywhere else in the league, and just leaning them, going, "Look, it's not any it's not any better than here." That would change massively if Pete Carroll left. And
and even
if they did what I said to you earlier.
Yeah, and even stuff like, giving the nurses and the medical team the chance to raise the 12th man flag. Like, that was a beautiful video. I had a tear in my eye watching that. It was so lovely. And Joe Fan, I would say, is one of Pete Carroll, football-wise, his biggest critics. And I've got a tremendous amount of respect for the way in which Joe Fan has done his work this season. But what you won't hear a peep about, rightly so, is any criticism about the way in which Pete Carroll has that team and the roster and the club as a culture together, because that's spot on. And you would lose that without him. It just depends on where your sliding scale is, on how important that is versus what we're seeing on the pitch, and how much the two it's a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, but that's not enough to keep. Like, that's not enough to keep him around.
No,
it almost is, because it is like again, the Seahawks never had it this good in that terms, because like a year before we're having Jim Mora throw kickers under the bus, and now we've got to protect the team and all that stuff. So, like I think I would be all right with Schottenheimer leaving. Pete Carroll would be a much tougher sell, I think.
Is that because he's kind of all we know / remember, and it would just be a readjustment period?
No, I don't think so. I just think it's the same reason that I think someone put on the group earlier talking about Jamal and the trade picks giving up. Like, he's a sure thing. Obviously, it's going to be an expensive sure thing, but he's a sure thing, and we just don't have a couple of maybes. Pete Carroll is a relative sure thing, and then we're just going to go into the maybe category. Because if Pete Carroll stepped up to the VMAC podium tonight, tomorrow, I don't know if he's talking again this week, and said, "Yeah, I've thought about."
Presumably tomorrow they clean the lockers out.
I think it's today because they've had all the players up today, so I don't know.
Of course.
But yeah, so whenever he talks anyway, he steps up and retires. Who are they going to get? Like, I can't. I can't remember what it was like when Holmgren retired. Like Pete Carroll's name came out of the blue. Obviously, they fired Jim Mora, Pete Carroll, and 10 days later Schneider came in. But who are they going to get? There's no one really in the college game. Dan Mullen is interviewing for the Jets job, but he's only getting that because of Carl Trask, and Carl Trask isn't that good.
Well, college-wise, you might say someone like Lincoln Riley.
But yeah,
I'm talking hypothetically here.
Yeah,
Obviously, I'm not saying that.
Probably, because he's the same kind of like young. But if you hire another college coach, are you just not going to be going through the same cyclical stuff every 4 or 5 years because they've only got experience coaching 20, 22-year-olds not being paid, and then they've got to deal with 32-year-olds getting 35 million?
Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, look, we're probably getting slightly bit ahead and sidetracked and on the hypotheticals, but I'm just trying to work out kind of what the other big takeaways are. Defensively, they've sorted themselves out, and it does seem like in general most of the guys should be back next year.
I mean, they're gonna be, right? I mean, that guy Puna should be because he's an exclusive rights or restricted. He may be paid. I don't know if they can pay him regardless on that deal. Jamal's going to be back. Bobby's going to be back. Jordan Brooks is going to have another year and do his legs. KJ Wright, we'll see. And you're relying on people like Cody Barton and BBK.
Daryl Taylor
to emerge. RJ Collier looks serviceable. Alton Robinson. Hawk Blogger was tweeting out last week the comparisons with him and Chase Young, which is a very Seahawk fan thing to do because, come on. But yeah, like the defense is fine. The biggest thing the defense got to do is what they do with Shaquille Griffin. Because the Seahawks have no evidence of bringing in a guy who's played elsewhere in the league at cornerback and has been a success. The only outside guy who was a success was Brandon Browner, and that was for 2 years, 2.5 years, 3 years if you include his year in New England. And he come from Canada, and he was someone that Pete could mould into it. He didn't have bad habits in inverted commas. So letting Shaquille Griffin go would be a risk. Offensively, it's a mess.
Especially if Dwayne Brown retires.
Oh, I mean, if Dwayne Brown retires, then yeah. I mean, like, I think we talked to our group chat last night with Will, who said that he thinks all the starting 5 airline are going to be back next year or in the building already. It doesn't fill me with the utmost of confidence. Postage was awful last night.
Awful.
Patty is. I mean, he's had neck injuries for the last 2 years. He's surely just going to walk away at some point. Brandon Shell is £800,000 right tackle, and Damian Lewis could be good. And Dwayne Brown is 36, 37, and could retire. I mean, look at the difference Whitworth made to the Rams last night. But yeah, it's going to be interesting off-season. The defense, I think, is fine. Norton's going to stay because Pete Carroll loves him. I think the only way Norton will leave is if Pete Carroll leaves. Yeah, anything else?
Don't know, really. Feel like there's so much
I'm
to
not
say.
sure it's been as cathartic as I thought it would be.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, like, it's been a weird few years. I don't feel like I've been on board particularly for the last few years in terms of how they want to play. And I feel like I've been more analytical than fanatical, which isn't like me and how I normally am. Like I don't celebrate as much during the games for the last few years as I have done in the past. I don't know why that is. But last night I was really upset. And
I was pissed.
Yeah. And like you, I was up till about 4 a.m, just sat there on my phone, just kind of trying to speak to anyone that I could speak to just to talk about it, and just read and listen to whatever I could about it. And in a way, I'm quite pleased that like I've still got that fire that burns and I passionately want these guys to win. But yeah, I really felt flat about this. I think partly because I may have an overinflated view of the amount of which they've spent going forward on this team and how much I fear that there's so much work to do in the off season. I might be completely wrong about, but everything that they did over the off season and then during the season made it feel like they were throwing the kitchen sink at this year. And for it to end in, if you lose in the Super Bowl, you can say, well, look, we're on the right. Even if you lost to the Packers in Lambeau in the championship game, steps have been made. But it's hard to look at it anyway as one step back at the minute. And as we were saying in our Facebook group earlier today, WhatsApp group, if we face the South teams instead of the East teams, the record may not have even hit double digits.
No. Well, I said at the start of the season, if this team wins 10 games, Russell Wilson should win MVP. They won 12 and he's not even going to get a vote. Which is just, it's wild. Yeah, I don't know. Like I've been criticised by people, not criticised, jousted by people I've watched games with this season for not like getting involved as they were when they're watching the games, because I just kind of sat there and just went, yeah. Like the only game I was involved in this year was when we beat the Rams 2 weeks ago. Because as the pod episode title said, that week, it was like, fucking finally, they've beat this team, and then that happens last night. But yeah, I think what Mike Douglas said on Man to Man podcast, which if no one listens to, they definitely should go and listen to that episode especially. But he said that, like, the biggest question marks this team are the people who wear the headsets during the game on the offensive side. So Russ, Canales, Austin Davis, and obviously Schottenheimer, because they're the people who either aren't here anymore, which is whatever, a bridge will cross when we get to it, or they need to just front up and go, look, this guy can do it this way. We need to start. And the only glimmer of hope, not hope, maybe hope's very strong, that it could actually happen is that Chris Carson won't be here next year. You haven't got that reliable running back to lean on. Rashard Penny, DJ Dallas, Carlos Hyde, Travis Homer, Alex Collins probably for 2 weeks. Like, the fact that running back, that legit RB1 is not going to be here may force the hand, but that's just very clutch straws a bit, Adam.
Is it acceptable that Nate Carroll, Austin Davis, who have absolutely no coaching pedigree, are so close to being so important in the Seahawks offense?
I think Austin Davis has a lot more breathing room than nepotism.
Yeah, that's fair.
Austin Davis was an NFL quarterback. Like, Jose Mourinho was not a good football player.
No, that's true. I'm just lashing now, to be honest. I'm just flailing.
But yeah, no, it's like I told my mate as a Rams fan, I was like, do you know who that guy is sitting next to us last night? He went, who? I was like, Austin Davis. And he just let out a cackle. Because, like, how is a team with just so much investment ended up with, I don't know, maybe I'm ended up the same avenue as you, maybe, but I was going down the same road there. But yeah, so do you think anything will change on the offensive side of the ball, coaching wise? I think Mike Solari will be fired.
It wouldn't surprise me if they made a gesture firing.
Yeah.
And yeah, it probably will be Solari. I think that would be a little bit harsh because if you look at where this offensive line was a couple of years ago, I mean, it was such a mess. And I do have to say that the Rams are one of the rare defenses that are in the NFL that are almost a shutdown defense. And that doesn't really exist anymore. And so to base too much of what the offensive line did this season on last night would be unfair. I thought overall the offensive line had, a B+ season, B to B+. I don't think they were the reason why Wilson, most of the sacks that he took, you can watch the tape back and, load of his sacks were on him. So I had no problem with Solari, but I think he'll be a gesture firing because they probably will see that as the easiest person. And I think Pete Carroll has too much emotionally invested in Brian Schottenheimer to pull the plug on him.
Why though?
I don't know.
If it was me, I would can Schottenheimer and just like we're seeing with Houston that Deshaun Watson is trying to push his way towards the exit door. Appears maybe in Miami because he wasn't involved in the decision process of a GM, which is surely as important to a quarterback as the guy calling the plays. Which is why Deshaun Watson wanted to be involved in this, because the GM is now going to pick the coach, which is going to help Deshaun, which is exactly the same as what the OC is going to do for Russell Wilson.
8 weeks in the NFL is more than long enough to base a trend and see patterns on it. And I would say that the last 8 weeks wouldn't have been a hell of a lot worse if you or I were calling the plays, or if we had those ill-fated moments in inverted commas where Wilson's headset magically goes off and he has to call the plays himself, and we end up scoring a touchdown every single time. I don't know how often you spend talking about the Seahawks outside of Seahawk fans and, talk to other people. But a mate of mine called me yesterday morning before the game and he said, if the Seahawks spiked the ball on first, second, and third down and then just let Wilson do whatever he wanted to on fourth down, would they be worse on offense? And obviously it's a very hyperbolic question. But imagine that even being asked of any other nominal top 5 quarterback in the NFL. And the way in which their teams are built around them. Like, Rodgers doesn't even like LaFleur, but has grown to begrudgingly respect the way in which he's got the best out of him. This team does nothing to get the best out of their best asset.
No. Also, does Aaron Rodgers like anyone?
No. Himself.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, I'd agree. But it's just, this is the worst loss for this Wilson-Carroll partnership. Like, Dallas was bad, but Dallas was bad because they took the ball out of Russell Wilson's hands out of stubbornness. Last night they put the ball in his hands and nothing was... Not that nothing was there, because people are pointing out on all 22 that stuff was there, but like the best play they made was an unbelievable throw from Wilson on a completely bust play. The only reason he gets that ball to DK Metcalf is because of how I think Leonard Floyd just falls over. Because he falls over like to the side of Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson can step up and do what he does. But like, you shouldn't be relying on broken plays in the playoffs after 16 games against a team you beat 2 weeks ago.
The Dallas and the Green Bay game over the last couple of years, you were begging for 5 more minutes on the clock because you would have won. Last night, I was relieved the game was over.
Yeah, although there was a slight sense when they got the fourth down stop, you're like, oh, for fuck's sake. Like,
I'd have been absolutely raging if they won that game. I'm not even sure I could have celebrated. I'd have been so angry. Like, when you angry celebrate, I'd have been smashing windows, I think.
It just wasn't very good, Adam.
Apart from that.
But, yeah, it was fine. I think, like I said, I don't think it was as cathartic as I thought it was going to be. Anything else you want to talk about from last night?
No, I've enjoyed it. This has been good. We're on a new platform. I think we've got a couple of Patreons watching.
Yeah, man.
They got any questions they want to buzz in?
Don't
know how we do this.
No, we post a comment. Post-comment, we'll see what happens. We'll come up and edit all of this out of the free version of this podcast. So Pete Carroll's staying.
Okay, so if Pete Carroll's contract was up now,
yeah,
would you want to extend him?
In a way that he wouldn't sign, if that makes sense. Because there is who are we gonna hire?
Forget that because coaches have come from all over. Like, no one really knew who Bill Belichick was when he joined the Patriots. They did, but as in he was a Browns decent head coach. It might be that Dan Quinn could come back and has learnt enough and could be a genius head coach. I'm not saying he would, but forget who they would hire. It is Pete Carroll, yes or no?
No.
Kind of says it all for me.
I mean, yes. No, I don't think I would, because it's just, I don't know. I think we can both say that, like, we follow sports, but we follow sports teams, and the sports teams we follow.
Mm-hmm.
The Seahawks one is supposed to be like,
it's supposed to be the fun.
Yeah, it's supposed to be the release.
Mm.
It's supposed to be like, yeah, we invested in it. Of course we are, but the investment is different. Does that make sense? Because like, if Cov lose, my weekend is ruined.
Yeah.
And yesterday, in 17 hours, Cov lost, and the Seahawks lost. So the only thing I've got now is Gustavo Hamer for the next 3 months until he leaves for 7-8 million in the summer, and then I've got, what have I got then? Thank T Dubbo. Yeah.
Got your podcast. You enjoy that?
So yeah, maybe, I guess. Dave asked, Dave Sayers, the hero of the Ped Pod. He is the listener. Like, we've always referenced him all season.
The one.
He is the one listener. Franchise tag for the year. Does it come into play? Shaquille Griffin. I think that's how they keep Shaquille Griffin. Which is
I mean, you're not going to give. Why? It's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money.
Like, that's really what he's worth over 2 years, to be honest.
I think is it 12.5 million for DBs?
It must be there or thereabouts.
Yeah, it's like, if Schneider hates it, and he doesn't like using it. I think the only time he used it was on. Did he use it on Hauschka? Like 2013, maybe. I think it's the only time they used it. He doesn't like use it, but use it for kicker. It's like 2.5 million. Use it on a DB because I don't know. Yeah, I think if they use it, it'll be Shaquille Griffin. Do you think?
I mean, for me, I'd be tempted to transition tag Chris Carson because I think that's 8.7 million, and which is a lot of money, and it's kind of what you'd want him to be signing for maybe a year and a half on, maybe 2 for 10 or whatever. No one else is going to give him more than that, and I think that's how it works, isn't it? Transition tag is if someone bids more, he can go. I think that's how it works.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not too sure, but also they won't do that, and they won't do that. Chris Carson will sign somewhere else, and they'll say, if that question's ever asked of them, why didn't you do X, Y to keep Carson? They'll say, because we respected what he did for us. We wanted to see him rewarded. I'll
tell you exactly what they'll say. In addition to that, they'll say, we told Chris to come back to us with whatever offer he was given, and we'd see what we could do. And they'll say, nope.
I kind of hope I'm wrong, but also I said earlier, I think if Chris Carson's not here, it will force the hand a little bit of whoever's calling the plays next year. But I think that's the thing I'm surest about of the Seahawks off season is that Chris Carson won't be here next year, which is like it's understandable for a lot of reasons. Obviously, the RB don't matter. Crowd will. I mean, imagine if they announce a contract extension tomorrow for Chris Carson. Imagine.
It'd be worth it just for the reaction.
It would be, but also he hasn't finished a 16-game season. He didn't finish He didn't have a full college season at Oklahoma State. Like, that's gonna, like, the availability and all that is kind of a massive thing for him. And obviously, they're replacing him with Rashad Penny, who's played 15 snaps in 2 years, which is also another issue. But yeah, I mean, if like after all that, and if they paid Chris Carson 3 years, 20
enough
million? Exactly. Imagine if they did that after last night, after this conversation, after all the words and syllables have been used on what happened and what the Seahawks need to do, and they went and paid a running back $9.5 million a year, with Pete Carroll and Brian Schottenheimer still calling the plays. Nothing will change. But if they let Carson go, it gives them 6 months of them not playing a game to go, maybe this could be different next year. And
I mean, the worry for me is they just end up running badly in that scenario.
Yeah, that is Very good point. So so do you think they're going to use the franchise?
I think we need to see kind of what the cap numbers look like or whatever. I'm not a big Shaq Griffin fan, particularly. I think he's fine. And I'm probably being seduced by the fact they managed to find DJ Reed and their pro scouting is so good. So just find another DJ Reed, which is not going to be that easy. But for me, if Shaq Griffin's number is going to begin with a 1 per year and it's 8 figures, then I'm out. I'm out.
It will be, because the cornerback market this year is not good or deep. Patrick Peterson is the top name on that list, and he's 33. So I think he'll be tagged. Anyone forgetting the bin, Adam, this week?
The whole fucking lot of the bastards.
I knew that was going to happen when I asked. If you want to get involved with the podcast, you can on the usual means and methods. This is our first Patreon live pod. If you want to get involved with that, you can on patreon.com/the pedestrian podcast. We got another pod coming later in the week with a very cool guest. But yeah, thank you for listening. Dave, thank you for joining in, and anyone else who joined in and watched this go down live. Until next time, this has been the Pedestrian Podcast.
Do something, Hawks.